and this is the final presentation for my virtual life-size chess game. So what does the game do? It's a virtual chess game where all the rules are the same, and but the chess pieces are actually life-size. So the two main things here are you need to be walking along the grid, and you need to push the pieces to actually move them. So a couple of functionalities I implemented are gesture recognition for a swiping motion like this that changes the direction, gesture recognition for the push motion, speech comments for selection and dropping off the chess pieces, also speech comments that can change the direction so that you can say like turn back instead of doing multiple swipes, IMU data for step count, and lastly, the chess game constraints are all implemented. So here is a user demo of the system.
Select. Drop it. Select. Drop. Turn back. Select. Drop.
And here is another demo done by a different user.
Select. 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 Drop it.
Okay, so for the implementation, I used the Google Speech API to receive speech comments like select and drop for the piece selection and any turning comments for the direction. And I used the media pipe gesture recognition to detect any swiping motion that changes the direction or any push motion that allows the user to move the pieces around. And lastly, for the IMU step counter, I used an IMU that is connected to an embedded chip, and which would write to a serial port on a computer, and using the reading the serial port would allow us to get the step increments. And eventually we would put all three together into the chess game rules, and enforcing the constraints, we would update the visualization of the Pygame UI. So in terms of the progress, what works well is gesture recognition for swiping motion is very accurate. This was even made more robust after the previous user study that you saw. IMU step count is very accurate, which I will elaborate a little more in a bit. Chess game rules are entirely enforced, and push motion is accurately detected. What does not work well is the webcam adjustment needed to be made for the new user based on their height, so that the push motion and the swiping motions were a bit more accurately detected. For the user feedback, as someone who was interested in chess, the idea was very intriguing to the last user. The combination of cardio and chess was a great idea. The moves were all accurately detected, besides a couple repeats with speech. And he was suggesting using speech word selection as well. using gesture for selection as well. There could be more real-time feedback, especially with selection, he said. And lastly, I had 4 friends in total try it and asked them if they would play it. And all 4 of them said they would if the simulation was actually added to this usage. So lastly, the interesting error that I had initially was that there was too much latency and some steps were not being counted properly. So to analyze this, I tried 2 setups. The first one was SensorLog, which is an app that logs the phone IMU data, and opening a WebSocket on the computer, I was able to receive this IMU data and compute some sort of a step count out of it. And the second is Arduino, which is the system that I'm using currently. And this is using an IMU sensor connected to an embedded chip. And the Arduino file computes steps and writes to an intermediate file. Then my system reads that file and moves user based on the step count, where 2 steps is 1 grid movements. So the analysis of this is that the integration of Google Speech and the WebSocket introduced a large amount of latency, which is why even though the phone IMU was great, running both did cause errors. So moving to a direct hardware connection did solve this issue, but now you're physically connected to the device, which is not great. So I guess a potential solution to both would be to use a different speech API or replace speech entirely with gestures and still use the phone IMU.